So, welcome back, New York Yankees fans, to the relaunch of the Pinstripe Prospects podcast. We are back, and we are better than ever with about a week to go until pitchers and catchers report to Tampa, Florida, spring training. We're excited to bring this podcast back to you, and here you will find the latest on not only the major league team, we're going to take it inside the minor league system throughout the year. We're going to be at minor league spring training. The site is next month, so we're going to give you more details on that later on. You're going to hear from our beat writers throughout the year at our respective affiliates, and we hope to have great guests that can provide further insight to the Yankees organization. Today's show is just going to be a little bit of background about us. We're going to look into the offseason as a whole, talk about what the Yankees have done, Garrett Cole, but we'll talk about some other things too. Any moves the Yankees might have left, and we'll get into the list of non-roster invitees. Who's the most intriguing hitter, pitcher, as those players will try to make a name for themselves when spring training games start on February 22nd. So we are not that far away. And joining me today is my co-host here on this podcast going forward. Happy to have him in the Pinstripe Prospects family. James O'Connell is here. James, welcome. How are you?
I'm great, Ricky. How you doing? Thanks for having me. Excited to get this thing going. Excited for the relaunch of this podcast, and should be a fun ride this season.
Absolutely. And as we're recording, we have big baseball news that we're going to get into before we do the Yankees offseason as a whole. But, James, before we do that, how about you tell listeners a little bit about yourself and what you've been doing before coming over here?
Well, so as of right now, I'm a senior at Hofstra University, but you might have seen me in the New York Daily News. I was an intern in there in the summer, mostly writing about baseball, kind of really all over the place, though. So you might have seen my bylines in the Daily News. I interned previously at Newsday. I was lucky enough to be in that locker room, in last year's locker room, and kind of enhanced my experience and knowledge of this team. So that's kind of really where my background is.
For those who don't know who I am, I'm Ricky Keeler. I helped out in the Staten Yankees beat writer position for Pinstripe Prospects over the last couple of years. I've been at Pinstripe Prospects for about 2-3 years now. I used to be at Yanks Go Yard doing some podcasts and minor league writing for them. You can actually catch my podcast, Kicking It with Keeler, on Full Press Radio. We've done about 13 episodes there. It's been a lot of fun. We do general sports there, but you can find me on Twitter at Rickinator555 as well. Talk some baseball. So we're excited to get this show on the road. And let's get into the big news, James. Of course, the big trade coming out on Tuesday night is the deal that sends Mookie Betts and David Price to the Dodgers. Jeff Passan of ESPN had it first. You've also seen Ken Rosenthal, John Heyman chime in as well. Ken Rosenthal added the Dodgers are sending Kenta Maeda to the Twins for right-hander Brusdar Graterol. You also might have Jock Peterson of the Angels that Ken Rosenthal had earlier. That's still a possibility on the table. And it looks like the Red Sox, we don't know what else they're getting back yet, but as we do it, but it'll be updated as we find out more. Alex Verdugo, the LA's top young outfielder, might be going to Boston as well. So, James, from what we know now, what do you make of this big trade as the Yankees don't have to see Mookie Betts much anymore now that he's on the West Coast in LA?
Well, you don't have to face Mookie Betts, like you said, 19 times a year anymore. But the thing that honestly stands out in my mind at this point is there's a team that's on the Yankees tier now. Before, as about 2 hours ago, the Yankees were standing alone on top of baseball, really with no company as who was the best team in the league and the team to beat and the favorite to win the World Series. Now, at this point, you have Mookie Betts and potentially David. I think David Price, is that confirmed at this point? David Price is going to the Dodgers.
Yes.
Okay, so you have Mookie Betts and David Price heading over to the Dodgers. That's going to ruffle those odds for who's going to win the World Series at this point. But yeah, it's great for the Yankees. They don't have to face Mookie Betts 19 times a year. That's great. But in the grand scheme of things, there's another team that's knocking on the door and really has a chance to not take the Yankees down, but really give them a run for their money. If you looked around before this trade, you were like, well, who's beating the Yankees? There was no real obvious answer because the Dodgers had their question marks. You know, you had Clayton Kershaw, who had his postseason struggles. You know, their lineup sure was strong, but they weren't a true postseason threat in the sense that they haven't gotten done before. If you had Mookie Betts, you had David Price. There's increasing odds that they're going to not to mention two World Series champions themselves from 2 years ago. Those odds are increasing that they could give the Yankees a run for their money. So, yeah, like I said, it's great getting them out of Boston, but sending them over to the team that makes them undoubtedly the biggest threat to stop the Yankees from getting 28. It's kind of a bittersweet feeling if you're a Yankee fan.
Brusdar Graterol actually is going to the Red Sox in this deal from Minnesota. So Graterol, the number 2 prospect according to a Baseball Prospectus, number 3 at MLB.com. So that's a big deal. Of course, Boston getting a top pitching prospect, but at the same time losing Mookie Betts in that lineup. Yes, you add Verdugo with Benintendi and Bradley, and that's still a good young outfield. But Betts is a one of the top 5 players in the game. That's tough to lose. I would make the case, James. I mean, the Dodgers are a threat to the Yankees, yes, but Dave Roberts is still the manager there. I look at this from American League perspective. Think about just how bad the American League has gotten. Boston doesn't have Alex Cora as its manager anymore. The Astros really haven't done much this winter. I mean, Zach Greinke's their number 2 now behind Justin Verlander, who's continuing to age. Who knows if he'll still be dominant? You look at really the Twins have been the only big team making a move. Tampa's still going to be good, but the Angels added Anthony Rendon, but really didn't add much pitching. Really, I think you look at this for the Yankees, who really got that much better to give them a significant challenge in the American League besides the Astros, who also have Dusty Baker, who's notoriously not a great playoff manager.
You could argue, and you would successfully argue, that there was not one contender from the 2019 season that got better. Well, maybe the Minnesota Twins, if you count them, but no one really has gotten any sort of better. Like the Twins, sure, they added Josh Allen, but can they beat the Yankees? They haven't been able to do it for 20 years. At this point, I think the Yankees' biggest threat in the American League resides in their own division. And if you told me that a year ago that it would be the Tampa Bay Rays, not the Boston Red Sox, I'd say you're crazy. But it's the Rays. The Rays are the Yankees' biggest threat in the American League, and that's bizarre. And they even got worse. Technically, they traded Tommy Pham to San Diego for Hunter Renfroe. But so if you go through the moves, you trade Tommy Pham, right? But they do bring back Renfroe, and they sign Jose Martinez. That lineup is formidable, and they're pitching. They're pitching to death. Hopefully you get a full year of a healthy Tyler Glasnow. Hopefully you get a full year of a healthy Blake Snell. Charlie Morton was phenomenal last year. Their bullpen is always going to be a pain. That's the team in the American League. It's crazy to think that the Tampa Bay Rays might just be the team in the American League that could give the Yankees the biggest run for their money. And, well, of course, you can have the Astros. The Astros are still a very talented group. But with Dusty Baker as your manager and all those outside factors looking in, it's tough to really have any sort of confidence in the Astros going forward. But, yeah, it's the American League is weak, but the team that really people are forgetting about is the Tampa Bay Rays.
I agree. The Rays are a really strong team. You look at that top 3 in the rotation with Snell, Glasnow, and Morton. That team is strong in any best of 5 or best of 7 series. The only thing I would look at with Tampa Bay is with this new rule that you have to face 3 batters coming out of the bullpen. Does that kind of limit the uniqueness that their bullpen seem to have? Or they can just throw anybody at any given time? I think that's the big question for them.
Right, but I do think it also will allow them to maybe have a longer leash on those starting pitchers, on those 3 top dominant starting pitchers. So if you really need 7 to 8 innings out of Snell, Glasnow, and Morton, like you'll push them because of that minimum, because you can't really throw 9 different pitchers to get the final 9 outs. You have to stick with one for was the 2 batter 3 batter minimum. Is a 2 batter minimum, correct?
I think it's 3.
3 batter minimum. Yeah, so you have to keep a guy in for 3 batters. Weren't they changing it to 2 batter? What is it? I don't know. I thought I saw some rumblings.
It's more than 1 batter.
Right. Yeah. So that's it's gonna. I guess it's gonna put a damper on Tampa Bay's ability to be astronomically different from any other team in baseball, but they're still going to be very good. It doesn't matter what rules you throw at them. They're always going to find a way to really rattle around and just poke you in the sides, because that's just what the Tampa Bay Rays do. They're a thorn in the side of the bigger market teams, and they'll always find a way to just really annoy you.
So let's take a look at the New York Yankees offseason in particular. Of course, they got the big Christmas present, 9 years, $324 million for Garrett Cole. I know some fans are probably like, you gave us the one big Christmas present, but you didn't really get us the other presents. But they did re-sign Brett Gardner. They've made small moves along the way, which we'll get into. But James, what do you think of the Yankees offseason as a whole with about a week to go till spring training?
Well, they really haven't done anything outside of adding Cole and Gardner, and you can't re-signing Gardner, but adding Cole, obviously you can't complain. You were as of an hour ago. We'll see how everyone reacts. The undisputed favorite to win the World Series, but so you can't really complain about the offseason. And I do see people on Twitter complaining. Oh, you let D walk on a 1 year contract. Oh, you let even Austin Romine walk. Oh, you let Betances walk. Well, there's good reason. You can make a very valid argument for letting all three of them go. Didi was not anywhere near the same Didi Gregorius we got to know over his 3-4 years with the Yankees. He took an enormous, and granted, it might be because of Tommy John surgery, but he took an enormous step back from behind the plate, and his arm, granted, looked nothing similar to that rifle we saw from him at shortstop. But so Didi with the injury, Glaber easily replaceable. Romine, I mean, people tremendously overrate Austin Romine because they don't see balls go to the backstop every time he's on the plate like they do with Gary Sanchez sometimes. So even they feel like, well, Austin Romine doesn't let balls go past him, so he's a great catcher. Well, no, he doesn't throw anyone out. He's not a very good hitter. He's replaceable. I think Kyle Higashioka will do a fine job at replacing him. And Dellin Betances, it's tough to dispute that the Yankees could obviously give him a 1 year contract to come back. But I trust that they know something that we don't with that injury. So I think that's the only really route you can take in the Betances thing because he is absolutely nasty when he's right. But if the Yankees know something we don't with the Achilles injury, then how can you really argue? What can really be argued against in this postseason? Sorry, not postseason, off season. But there's rumblings about I don't know Nolan Arenado being here. That's a bunch of nonsense. The Yankees, as of right now, are the team to beat in the American League. We can at least say that at this point. There's no question about it. They're the team to beat in the American League. Do you have to go out and get a Nolan Arenado? Do you have to go out and get another star to elevate your status? I don't know. We'll see how good the Dodgers are. But at this point in time, the Yankees, I think, have improved as much as you can ask. They added that horse, and there's nothing more you can really ask for from them.
Yeah, I think when you look at the Yankees, a lot of what they have, Brian Cashman trusts internally. I mean, Aaron Hicks is injured, yes, and he's going to miss the bulk of the season. But you have Mike Tauchman, who earned the trust last year with the way he played. You have Kyle Higashioka behind the plate that has proven in the limited sample size that he can play at the major league level to help back up Gary Sanchez. So you don't really have to go out and pay a backup catcher a huge amount of money. You have guys in place that can fill in Glaber at short, DJ LeMahieu at second base. Like you have those internal options there. And I think in the argument for Betances, there was a lure to play for a manager with the Mets who's no longer the manager in Carlos Beltran. So even if the Yankees had a competitive offer, I think Betances wanted to play for his friend, and now he's not playing for his friend.
Hmm. I don't, you know, there's, I actually kind of want to address this Nolan Arenado thing. It's kind of been bothering me for a while. The fans on Twitter clamoring for Nolan Arenado must have no idea about the current payroll situation. I know people say it's not your money. What do you care? That the Yankees have unlimited money. No, they have a $257 million payroll. The third luxury tax is, I believe, $240 million. You're approximately $17 million over the third luxury tax. You cannot add a $36 million contract when you're already over the 17. You're already $17 million over the harshest penalty you could receive. So the Nolan Arenado thing is a myth, in my opinion. The Yankees cannot make that move. Financially, it makes no sense. You have Gleyber Torres and Aaron Judge due to be paid very soon, sooner rather than later. And if Gary Sanchez gets his act together at the plate, maybe you got to pay him too, but you don't know. But I think it's safe to say you're going to have to pay Aaron Judge and Gleyber Torres. When those guys become free agents, you're gonna really be aggravated that you can't resign them because you have $36 million. You made that trade for Nolan Arenado getting $36 million. The Giancarlo Stanton trade. I saw people yelling about it last offseason when they wanted to trade or sign Manny Machado or Bryce Harper. These actions have consequences, and I get it. Fans don't really believe that, but they do. So if you're clamoring for Nolan Arenado and they get him, don't complain when Aaron Judge and Gleyber Torres are playing for other teams when they're up in free agency. That's all I'm saying on that perspective. And sure, and I actually want to bring up another thing. Francisco Lindor. If the Yankees really need to make a trade at the deadline at this point, Francisco Lindor is not getting traded this offseason. I think we're aware of that. He would get traded at the deadline. If the Yankees are in need of star power or in need of change, then go out and get Francisco Lindor. He's not making really any money. He's due to make money. He's due to make money at some point, but that would be the move to make, not to spend $36 million on a Nolan Arenado contract. And when you already have Gio Urshela at third base, and Miguel Andujar, I know defensive problems, but that guy can rake. So Arenado doesn't make sense. So that was really burning a hole in my chest there. I had to address that.
And I think to go off your point, James, on Arenado, if you're a Yankees fan, look what the team up north is doing right now in the Red Sox. Do you really want to be them? Yes, they have a world championship, but do you want to eventually get to the point where you have to attach top prospects to deals to just eat money? Like you don't want to get to that. You don't want to get to that point.
Imagine the pain that a Boston Red. Just go look at Jared Carrabis' Twitter page. Look at the pain these people are dealing with trading Mookie Betts. That's going to be you with Aaron Judge or Gleyber Torres. Just if you want the Yankees to keep spending money the way they're spending, they've spent enough money. Their team is phenomenal. You don't have to keep adding on top of that. So again, don't complain if they do make some significant, ridiculous move to add $36 million onto the payroll when Aaron Judge and Gleyber Torres are walking, because the Red Sox are suffering the consequences of that right now.
Which I don't really think there's any big move the Yankees have to make. They don't have to make the Arenado move. They don't have to make the Lindor move. I think really the only move you're looking at is maybe J Happ getting traded, but that's I think only if the Yankees like what they see from Jordan Montgomery in spring training, that they feel confident to give him the 5-starter spot while Herman's serving the suspension, while Davy Garcia is getting used to the Major League ball. If they feel he needs more time in AAA, we'll see what Clark Schmidt does. I'm sure we'll get to him later. But for right now, I mean, really only significant move is Happ if a team maybe loses a pitcher in spring training due to injury and you can find somebody to take on some of that money. But that's really all I could see happening.
Yeah, well, J Happ would probably be the obvious move to shed salary and I had this conversation with a couple of fellow Yankee fans that, well, the Yankees have a ton of money coming off the books in the offseason. Like Happ's coming off the books, Tanaka, Paxton. But if you let all those guys walk, you don't have a team. You still need to put a team on the field. You still want to keep the score together. So don't discount because they're relieving so much salary that they don't have to bring that back. If James Paxton performs, you're going to want to pay James Paxton. But you let J Happ walk, but some of these guys, do you want Masahiro Tanaka to walk? No, you don't want these guys to walk. So it's a tricky situation with this payroll.
So let's get into Garrett Cole. Of course, 9 years, $324 million. We all know the big contract. We all know the big splash the Yankees made at the winter meeting. So, James, let's dive into Cole a little bit. What do you feel his impact is? How does it trickle down to the rest of the Yankees? And the excitement of having him, I think, pitching opening day for wearing the pinstripes after tormenting them with the Astros last year.
Yeah, well, not much really has to be said. This is arguably the best pitcher in baseball, one or two between him and Jacob deGrom. If you want to throw Max Scherzer, sure. But this is Garrett Cole we're talking about. You saw what he did in Houston. And the trickle-down effect, I think, number one, it takes an enormous amount of pressure off Luis Severino. Luis Severino could probably go back to that 2017 dominant version of himself, that early part of 2018 dominant self, without really much pressure to going on him. Garrett Cole's $324 million is absorbing that pressure for a majority of that staff. James Paxton, I think, is a phenomenal pitcher, but Garrett Cole is going to have the impact he's going to have on this pitching staff is going to be like absolutely limitless. The things he learned in Houston, I'd imagine he can at some point relay to these Yankees pitchers regarding spin rate and all this stuff. So it's more than just signing the best pitcher in baseball, or arguably the best pitcher in baseball. You're signing a guy that just learned a whole lot about pitching and is arguably he is at the top of his career. He's only 29 years old, and you have him for 9 years. So really be thankful for what you have here, because you're not just getting an ace. You're getting someone who's very knowledgeable about the game.
Yeah, I think you look at Garrett Cole. I think the addition also of Matt Blake as a new pitching coach helped because Matt
Right.
Blake has the sabermetric mind, and now you bring in Blake to add more knowledge to Garrett Cole and add more knowledge to Severino, Tanaka, and Paxton. Maybe they find that one little thing that Cole found that changes everything for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it adds that dimension to it. And when you now go into a playoff rotation, maybe outside of Tampa Bay in the American League, you're now putting Severino, Paxton, Tanaka against starters that they might have the edge with. I think that
Mm-hmm.
also helps. And
Right.
the other thing you look at, it takes Chad Green out of the rotation or out of the opener unless they absolutely need
Right.
it. Chad Green deserves to be what Dylan Betances was for the Yankees, and that's pitch in the sixth, seventh inning, get 3 to 4 outs, maybe even 5 outs on occasion, but at least allows Chad Green to not be used as much. And when he has to pitch in the playoffs, not pitch every day to where the Astros know what's coming. Oh, wait, that might be a sign of the times.
Hmm.
But I digress. In a game 6 where he just didn't have anything at the end.
And I'm glad you hit on that point because entering the postseason or entering really that Astros series, it was so obvious how gassed some of these guys in the Yankees bullpen was. And then in Garrett Cole, you're going to take a lot of pressure off those guys in the bullpen, take a lot of innings off those guys in the bullpen. The Yankees have added a 200 inning pitcher. The impact that's going to have on their bullpen and their overall pitching is huge. So you really, with this bullpen, and you have that staff and Canley, Green, Ottavino, Chapman, Britton. I mean, the bullpen combined with that starting five, it makes for a deadly, deadly combo in October.
And they got Chapman back on a pretty favorable deal too. I
Right.
mean, not allowing him to get to the market, I thought was getting the market to a big extent. I thought
Mm-hmm.
was big for the Yankees as well because it limited really how much other teams could spend and then helped them immediately get right to Garrett Cole. That also was a small portion of what the Yankees did this winter. So let's get into, of course, the non-roster invitees. But first, we want to tell you about the new era over at Pinstripe Prospects. The podcast is back. We have many other things to provide as well, and that can happen to your computer or phone or any device you use to access Pinstripe Prospects. Is we are now providing exclusive minor league content to paid subscribers with our new Dugout membership program. You'll get scouting reports, player interviews, features, minor league spring training coverage, which starts next month, and much more in addition to some of our free major league coverage. Keep an eye out for some of the giveaways we are doing on our Twitter account at Pinstripe Pros. And trust me, they are awesome giveaways. There's game used jerseys involved, people. You want those? Get on the subscriptions. We continue to get new subscribers daily. Also, follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We have great articles, and we'll tell you about some of them that are out at the end of the show, so you can go check them out as well. So, of course, the Yankees made some big news this week in terms of announcing their non-roster invitees who get into spring training. Of course, there are guys that are on the 40-man roster there already, guys like Garcia, Luis Medina, Luis Heels there as well. But we want to touch on a couple of guys that stuck out to us that maybe will make an impact this spring training. Maybe they make the roster, maybe they don't make the roster, but they find a way to make an impact at some point in 2020. And I want to start, James, with the hitters. Who
Mm-hmm.
is the hitter that you have your eye on in terms of these non-roster invitees? What stands out to you?
Well, the guy I have my eye on is Chris Iannetta. So no secret. Again, we discussed it before. Austin Romine is the Detroit Tiger. The Yankees' backup catching position is up for grabs. Chris Iannetta has experience in Colorado. I was just actually listening to WFAN this afternoon, and Adam Ottavino was on talking with I believe Sweeney Murdy, and Ottavino said that Chris Iannetta is one of the smartest guys he's ever met in the game, and he hits the ball harder than anyone he's ever seen. That as hard as anyone he's ever seen. Of course, Giancarlo Stanton and Aaron Judge are on his team, but for the Yankees, they love their exit velocity. They love guys that hit the ball hard. Chris Iannetta, apparently, according to Adam Ottavino, hits the ball hard, and he's a very smart catcher. So I think he's kind of the bat to watch because there's a clear path for him to make the roster. Some of these guys, you're thinking, oh, I'm happy to get a look at him, but Iannetta, there's a real shot that he's on the major league team because if Kyle Higashioka has a tough spring, well, Chris Iannetta steps in. That's a veteran. It's a veteran catcher that could play a huge role for the Yankees in 2020.
The catcher position, I think, is what stands out the most. Obviously, you have Zach Granite, who the Yankees brought in, who's a local guy that I think will get maybe some buzz in spring training, being that he played in New York City before starting his professional career. I think you can also look at a couple of the minor league players, guys like Chris Gittens, who had a huge year in Double A for Trenton last year. I think he's going to get a lot of look. Kyle Holder's improved offensively at shortstop. I think he's a guy to watch. But in terms of the veterans they brought in, not just Ionita, though, James, I think they focused a lot on veteran catching, bringing
Yep.
back Eric Kratz,
Hmm.
who, yes, he's 39 years old, but he's clearly made an impact, whether it's just mentoring younger players or being able to still produce at
Yeah.
a high level for a backup. And also Josh Tolley, who, yes, is forgotten from playing with the Mets. He's not really been the player that a lot of people thought he would be, but they've clearly made an emphasis on we're going to bring veteran catchers in also to help guys in the minor league system, guys like Donnie Sands, guys like Josh Bro, allow them to continue to develop without being rushed, but also to kind of give Kyle Higashioka a push. Yes, it's his job, but you don't want a young player going into spring training thinking they've got the job already because they might not play as hard as they would if they're competing for a job. So at least having those guys to either A, push Higashioka or mentor him, I think is an added bonus to having three catchers in camp.
And I don't think there's any doubt that bringing these veteran catchers in are also meant to have an impact on Gary Sanchez. This offseason, the Yankees have quietly done things to kind of cater around Gary Sanchez, like adding Tanner Swanson as their catching coach. They're clearly making emphasis on catcher because Gary Sanchez is a very talented baseball player. And to see him struggle the way he struggled the last 2 years, it makes almost no sense. When you see him being lost at the plate, lost behind the plate, you're like, what is this guy doing? He is so talented. They compared his swing to Manny Ramirez. Like, he is that phenomenal 2016 run. He had a great year in 2017. Then all of a sudden, you get Joe Girardi out of the fold, and then the wheels fall off. I think you need someone with some type of catching experience to mentor Gary Sanchez, and they did that with Tanner Swanson, and they did that, as you said, by adding three veteran catchers with major big league experience to really mentor him, and I think that'll play a huge role. So obviously, they're making an emphasis on catcher for that specific reason, in my opinion, at least.
I liked Ionetta the most out of those three. I think just for Ionetta, just providing that veteran experience, if one or two of those guys can do that, I think it will be an added bonus to this team. And I think they have a good mix of hitting options to watch, but of course, pitching I think is going to be all right. So let's take a look again at the Yankees pitchers that were reported into non-roster invitees in the spring training. You've got names like Clark Schmidt. You have Domingo Acevedo back in camp. Luis Avilan is a veteran. The Yankees brought in David Hale. Nick Tropiano is a local player as well. I think that it's going to provide some buzz a little bit at the beginning of spring training. So, James, look at the pitchers. Who stands out to you the most heading into Tampa this week or next
Well,
week?
it has to be Clark Schmidt. It's the obvious answer. He's getting the buzz on social media. Just from the allure of being former first round pick, and he really has that high quality stuff that really could step into the Yankees #5 starter because J Happ again is very movable. So if Clark Schmidt comes in and really shines in spring training, that could be your #5 starter.
It's possible. I mean, you have to again look. I think let's see what he has with the major league ball. I think that does play a factor, but he's still got really good upside. I think you look at him coming out of college. There's a reason why the Yankees drafted him high, despite having Tommy John surgery. He is a player that has the stuff to be successful. It's clear, and I'm excited to see what he can do in spring training with Davey Garcia, who's on the 40-man roster. I think those two pitchers are going to be in the eye of everybody down there, along with Luis Gil, Luis Medina, Albert Abreu in terms of the 40-man. I'm going to take a look at maybe some veterans that can help the big league club before I get maybe one guy later. I think it's getting looked in the Yankees system that will be in spring training as well. David Hale's back. And I think you look at the Yankee bullpen last year, we talked earlier about Green and Canely and Ottavino and the main players. David Hale bailed them out of a lot of big situations. And maybe it was just that 1 year kind of thing. But I think having him back in the fold could help a little bit. They did bring Tyler Lyons back. Dan Otero's a veteran who has experience. Avilan's intriguing because now you got that new, you can't face one batter, and he's mainly a lefty guy. But I think the good mix of bringing these veteran relievers into camp, maybe one of them sticks and plays an impact.
Yeah, to your point about David Hale, I mean, there was a point where people were calling him the Yankees' most trusty reliever, which was absolutely ridiculous, of course. But he was people underestimate how strong of an impact he really had on that bullpen in 2019. Sure, it was kind of limited to only 20 games, but 3.11 ERA. He was honestly very, very effective out of that bullpen. So I think not overlooking David Hale is very important because again you technically lost Betances but he didn't really pitch all year, so he could really slide into that bullpen again, and he could obviously, as he showed last year, do a very good job at being a part of it.
Absolutely. When you look at the Yankees as well, I think one of the big things they like to do, again, is just seeing maybe they find a player and they work with him in spring training and they see something that fits. And you never know. The Yankees like to bring relievers back and forth with the Scranton shuttle. So maybe
Right.
one or two of these pitchers come up and spell a guy for a day. Maybe have a good week or two that while somebody's struggling that plays an impact on the big league club in 2020. A prospect I want to get into a little bit is Alexander Vizcaino. And he gets lost in the shuffle, I think. When you look at Yankee minor league pitcher, we talk about Garcia, we talk about Schmidt, and you look at the Charleston River Dogs last year, and they had Luis Gil, and they had Luis Medina, and they have Roansy Contreras, and those are the guys I talked about. This kind of gets overlooked, and he's a pitcher that had a really good first half in Charleston. He got a chance to go to Tampa at the end of the season, so he's getting a chance to at least get into Major League Spring Training, see what that's like, and I think he could play a role down the road, like 2, 3 years down the road, if he continues to develop. I think he has a really good strikeout capability, 101 strikeouts with Charleston this past year. Keep an eye on him. And in terms of a 40-man guy, I like Nick Nelson a lot. I think he's a pitcher that I've talked to him early in the offseason, and he's a pitcher that continues to enhance his game. He looks at the game analytically, and that's a huge plus. When you look at what the Yankees have done this offseason is bring in more analytically minded pitching coaches. I think it's only going to help this team as they continue to try to get what everybody's doing in terms of getting that advanced information and relaying it to their players. That's going to have a huge impact, I think, on the minor league system this year as players continue to learn those extra numbers or two, or that extra layer of data that makes them better.
Right. And the addition of Matt Blake, as everyone really pointed out, it doesn't stop at the major league club. He's not just going to be involved with he's going with the major league club. He's going to be really have his hands on a lot of things, and that includes developing these pitchers in spring training. So again, when you get a guy like Nick Nelson who walks into major league camp, or any of these younger starting pitchers, you want Matt Blake really with kind of fixing them, helping them, and diving into the numbers, and diving into what pitch works for them, what doesn't work for them. So it's going to be a very different approach to pitching than we've seen in years past with Larry Rothschild, who I'm really not sure what he really did while he was here. But yeah, Matt Blake it's a different era for Yankees pitching with Matt Blake in the fold, and that's going to be an impact that's felt on an organization level, not just the big league club level, but every level in that system is going to feel a major impact with this new analytically driven thinking that the Yankees have really embraced.
We mentioned Blake is kind of that extra addition the Yankees have made over the winter, and I think that's key to note. Also key is Eric Cressey.
Right.
Adding him to sort of help the health of this team. Of course, the Yankees had so many injuries last year. It was a mass unit practically at times where I don't know if that maybe there's 2 or 3 or 4 fewer injuries, but at the same time, if you can limit those injuries, and we'll see what Cressey and his team bring to the fold there, but it just adds, hopefully the Yankees can have guys stay healthier throughout the year. You can't predict injuries. It's really the most unpredictable thing in sports. But at the same time, if you can save 1 or 2 bodies down the road, it only helps this team for the long run.
Of course. And you wrote, and under the radar move the Yankees made, I wrote down Eric Cressey because this team was decimated by injuries the entire season. So you bring in a guy who really knows what he's doing and really has had experience with all types of major league players and all types of injuries and different types of players. So if the Yankees can manage really to stay healthy, you got to hope that this training staff has that impact that they're looking for, because you can't afford these injuries that you had last year.
So if what we learned from this episode 1 of the relaunch here is, if you listen to James, do not expect any big blockbuster moves from the Yankees, although you never know. Brian Cashman might be cooking something up right now, and we just never see it coming. That's the big thing with him. But I think this team, James, is set and ready to go. They really don't need to do much else. Again, we'll see. Spring training can always change things. You can have an injury, and all of a sudden, boom, some big players traded to the Yankees or signs with the Yankees or something happens. But I think for right now, you have to be really confident with this team. going into Tampa next week. And we're going to dive, of course, into some storylines that we're personally looking into next week. And I'm excited to do that. But overall, I think this team is ready to go.
This is the group. I think this is the group. Bearing some type of major injury where you have to go out and get a type of bat or an arm, I think this is the group that you're going to see until July when that trade deadline hits, where they make a move here and there. But unless major injury or another Luke Voigt, Gio Urshela type of situation enters a fold where you don't expect a certain player to be on the roster. But I don't know if that's going to happen. Of course, we never do with Brian Cashman at the helm, but we'll see. I think there's no doubt that this is the group, but there's areas that this team could I guess add. I think a guy that's kind of lost out there without a home is Brock Holt. Now I know that would be kind of a knife in the heart to the fans of the Boston Red Sox, but Brock Holt, for some bizarre reason, has not been signed yet, and he is a phenomenal utility player. And if you don't trust, I don't know, someone like Tyler Wade to play that utility man role, then go out and get Brock Holt. He's not going to cost you really anything at all. He's good. He's versatile in the field. He's Last year he batted 297. I know batting average, this and that, yada yada yada. DJ LeMahieu showed you that if you put the bat on the ball, things can happen. So especially as a role player. But if I'm the Yankees and there's one move that they can make that could really just kind of add some assurance to this team, because Gleyber Torres has his question marks at shortstop. Miguel Andujar, is he playing in the infield? Go out and get Brock Holt. That would be my final piece of the puzzle here.
That is something to monitor, especially now that you can have 26 players in the roster instead of 25. Tyler Wade's going to get a shot. But if the Yankees feel that Brock Holt can provide an impact, maybe they go that route. We'll find out. But a lot of things can change, and that's why what makes spring training exciting until the games get underway. So I want to get into, as we wrap up the show, some of the content that you'll find at pinstripeprospects.com. If you're new to the podcast, if you're new to the website, we have a lot of great articles up. We'll try to profile a couple of them for you. Our editor-in-chief, Rob Pimpsner, does a good job answering your questions with our mailbag. So if you have a question, you can always tweet us at Pinstripe Pros. We'll gladly answer it for you. We have our top 50 prospects list, which you get if you subscribe. So remember from earlier, go to the site, subscribe, and you get our top 50 prospect list. We have information on all the prospects there, so you can check that out. One of our newest writers, Wade Smith, has a great piece on Ty Hensley, a former top Yankee pitching prospect who's working his way back. Hopefully he had a long road in terms of injuries, and his story is very powerful. You want to check that out. Wade does a great job talking to Ty Hensley for the story. You can catch my article, of course. Last year I was a beat writer on the Stallion Yankees, and what I did throughout the season at the Penn League All-Star game was I asked a couple of opposing players. I asked Brooklyn Cyclones manager Gardo Alfonso at the time, now he's not anymore, but what about the Stallion Yankees stood out to them? So you want to get the viewpoint of how prospects stand out from the opposition. You can check that out. We have articles on the minor league coaching assignments for the full season teams. We have the non-roster invitee list. So much in scouting reports. The whole 9 yards is at pinstripeprospects.com. So please go there, check it out, subscribe. We would really appreciate it. James, so before we wrap it up, tell listeners how they can follow you on Twitter as we get set to head into next week.
Yep, so give me a follow on Twitter at O'Connell James NY. Really tweet out mostly Yankee stuff. You'll see me occasionally screaming about the Knicks on there, but I'm mostly all about baseball, all about Yankees. So give me a follow. It's going to be a fun year. Excited for this podcast moving forward. So, yeah.
You can follow me again on Twitter at Rickinator555. It's at RICK, Nader, like in Terminator 555. Do a lot of baseball, football, basketball, whole night, basically most sports, but you'll find me there for baseball season as well as we get ready. So hopefully next week we'll be back for you. We're going to do, again, hopefully our top 5 storylines for spring training. We're going to look into that top 50 prospect list a little bit, talk about our favorite prospects, guys we're watching going into the season, and we're going to have some fun diving into the system a little bit more next week for all of you. So for James O'Connell, I'm Ricky Keeler saying enjoy the rest of your week. We'll see you back here next week as pitchers and catchers will report down in Tampa. Until then, talk to you later, everybody.
Later.